I start with the image of a battlefield of opinions. This is the Artemisium of Ephesus. We will come to this a little bit later, but I think it's the best way to start this lecture. Now I have to see. Okay. When talking about, can I get this off? Yeah. When talking about early electrum coinage, we first have to define what is early and what is electrum coinage. Early, this has never been defined, but so to speak, it is the electrum coinage of the 7th and the 6th centuries BC. And when looking at the coins themselves, we discover a wide range of diverging coinages. I keep building up, together with the ANS in New York, a database of these early electrum coinages, except for the known coinages of Cyzicus, Phocaea, Mytilene, and so on. And even so, this is a very, very wide range of, well, approximately 400 to 500 different coinages. Many of them are quite small. Some of them are known by one specimen only, and so it is hard to distribute the respective coinage even to a coin standard. This is what we will see a little bit later. If you have a very small coin which you cannot link to another coin of a higher denomination, it is often very hard to say to which coin standard it belongs. Now, when historians are used to ask numismatists what the significance of early electrum coinage might be, and they're very fond of the question whether it has to do with the birth of the Greek polis or with the royal dynasty of Lydia, and so on and so on. And to be honest, this is a question that is very hard to answer, just because the chronology of early electrum coinage has been a battlefield since very up to very recently. And historians are also often asking whether a coinage, an electrum coinage, might have been struck by a dynasty or a polis, or maybe a guild of bankers or traders, and so on and so on. And to be honest, again, in most cases, we cannot answer this question. As far as we know these coinages, they belong to either a dynasty, in most instances the dynasty of the Lydian kingdom, or to a Greek polis. The evidence that private individuals struck coins is extremely limited. Actually, we have a few coinages with names on them, and cannot tell whether this is just a magistrate or a banker or a trader or whatever. So this question cannot be answered as well. Now, where is the area where these coinages were minted? What you can see here is the Near East, or from the European point of view, the Near East. It's Turkey and Phoenicia, and the things happen in this very small area. Lydia, here's the capital of Lydia, Sardis, and the coastal strip with the Ionian cities. A little bit later on in the 6th century, Caria also plays a role in this game, and of course Mysia with Cyzicus, and even a remote city like Heraclea Pontica joins this game in the later 6th century. So this is the area we are talking about. When looking on a political map, you can see how small this coastal strip is that was covered by the Greeks in the 7th and 6th centuries. The most powerful political player in this time was the Lydian kingdom, with the capital of Sardis over here. And the Lydian kingdom is known mainly from Herodotus' books. However, as we know, since about 150 years, Herodotus' chronology of the Lydian kingdom is well, false is the wrong word, but it's not to be used as a backbone in this matter. A better source for the chronology are the Assyrian sources, the Assyrian annals from the time of Assurbanipal in Assur. Now, let's start with the earliest coinages of Lydia, which can be dated fairly precise. The first, the upper row and the stater at the left are from the time of King Gyges, the first king of the Lydian dynasty of the Myrmidons. And because we know from Assyrian sources that King Gyges was killed in action in 644 BC, these coins can be dated to the time before. The triti in the upper row at right even has his name. In the middle between the two line heads, there's the line kukalim, which is of course not a Greek word, but it's Lydian. According to the linguists, this can be read as "I am of Gyges." Kukas is the Lydian form of the Greek name Gyges. And so it's actually a parallel to some Greek coin inscriptions like Phanios, Emisema, or things like that, or just the genitive of King Kukas. The triti at the left side in the upper row can be linked to the Kukas coinage by a die link from reverse punches, and it seems to be a little bit earlier than the coins signed by Kukas. The stater at left in the lower row is a singleton in the British Museum, and it's a very curious matter because the two line heads that you can see on the surface are not confronted in the right way, so they look in diverging directions. And actually, one can ask whether the die used for this stater was thought to be used for staters at all. It could also be a die to be used for triti only, and this stater was something like a makeshift in a situation we cannot reconstruct. And lastly, the stater on the right side belongs to a well-known series that couldn't be dated for a long time. But about 10 years ago, a large hoard of Lydian Walwet triti came up, and some tritis of this series with the facing line or punter heads was part of this hoard, and therefore because we can date the Lydian coins signed by a certain Valvet to the time between 640 and 620, this series belongs to this time too. Now, early Electrum coinage falls into various weight standards, but the majority of them have in common that the stater is divided into thirds, the so-called trites. And afterwards, this denomination is halved again and again. So we have trites, the thirds, we have sixths, the hecties, hemihecties. So this is a 12th, 24th, 48th, and in some series we have even 96th of a stater and 192nds of a stater, which are coins below 0.01 gram. Very, very complex to handle, I guess. And I can add that some years ago, a modern banker by the name François Felde has calculated that a 96th of a stater struck in Electrum in the Milesian standard has a value worth about a week's wage of a simple worker in the 7th or 6th centuries. So you can imagine what fortune an Electrum stater might have been in the 7th or 6th centuries. Looking at these standards, we have mainly four. There are some local standards which I am not going to deal with today. The main standard is the Milesian standard that I have been talking about in the past minutes. I did not mention that there are also hemi-staters, so the half of a stater, but they are quite rare. The main denominations are the trites and hecties, and of course the smaller denominations occur very often, but they are harder to deal with and harder to recognize, because they are quite often very similar in weight to other small denominations in other standards. So, for instance, when you have a singleton of a series, which weighs about, let's say, 0.25 grams, it is hard to say whether this is a coin struck according to the Milesian standard or the Phocéan standard, Samian standard, and so on, because low denominations have the proclivity to be underweight. This is something that occurs also with silver coins, of course, but in Electrum, with Electrum coinages, it becomes a problem, because many of these coinages cannot be distributed to one of the standards. One fact that is just a fact is that in the Phocéan standard, there are no hemi-staters, nor are there any trites. We do not know why, and even the stater is a very rare phenomenon that is actually known only from the 7th century BC. In later times, when you think of the Phocéan coinage, the hecti, the 6th of the stater, is the main denomination. Within the Phocéan standard, the stater occurs only with Cyzicus and Phocea. In Cyzicus, of course, it went down to the time of Alexander, but with Phocea, the stater weight disappears from the record within the 7th century. So we have only a few staters from the very earliest time, and afterwards, Phocea seems to have been striking hecties and lower denominations only. The Samian standard is, of course, very familiar to you because the stator weight is exactly the same as with the Euboean Attic silver standard. And it's also divided in halves. The hemistators are as heavy as the norm of the Attic diagram. But afterwards, it's divided into thirds, sixths, and so on, just like the other standards. And last but not least, there's the agenetic standard, which is known only from a few late 6th century coinages from Rhodes, from the Rhodian cities of Lindos, Kamiros, and Ialissos. And afterwards, it disappears from the record of Asia Minor. It reoccurs, however, in Boeotia in the 4th century BC. There's a small coinage which is very hard to date. Usually it's dated to the Corinthian War, early 4th century. But my suspicion would be that it is much later, either from the time of Epaminondas, as was suggested 10 years ago by somebody by the name Garland, or from the Third Sacred War, from the middle of the 4th century. We just do not know yet. The agenetic standard is not divided according to the other Electrum standard, maybe because it was originally a silver standard. And so the division into drams, hemidrams, and sol obols was already introduced when it was used as an Electrum standard as well. So these are the main facts in metrology. Another parameter that we have to take into account is the alloy. What is electrum actually? Electrum is an alloy of mainly gold and silver with a small admixture of copper. Actually, the copper is not necessary for the value of the coin. However, it is indispensable in order to harden the coin. This is just because the atomic radius of gold and silver are very similar to each other. And if you mix an alloy of gold and silver alone, this alloy would be as hard or as soft as silver. And obviously, from the very beginning of the early Electrum coinage, the lords of the mint were eager to have very hard coins. And therefore, a small admixture of copper, something between 1 or 5 to 5% of the alloy, was given to the alloy, because the atomic radius of copper is quite different from that of the other two metals of the alloy. What is also found in an Electrum coin, here you have the metal analysis of a treaty of a man by the name Phanes from the late 7th century. All the other components like lead, tin, and so on are just in there by chance, because they're part of the other components, gold and silver, and so on. And so you can actually ignore all them and keep to the 3 main components. This treaty of Phanes has peculiar alloy with a very high component of silver, nearly 60%, while the gold component is as low as 35%. And in this case, the copper has nearly 5%. And when looking at these results, numismatists keep saying, "Oh, the copper is so high just because the gold is so low, and so they had to adjust the color of the coin." Here you have this well-known triangle with the various colors that can be produced by adjusting the three components, and it is clear the more copper you put in the alloy, the more red the alloy will be. However, this is not the rule that a small component of gold means that the component of copper will be higher than usual. And in the case of the Farnese coins, it occurs even that that the kernel, the core of the coin, is nearly silver. So it's actually a sub-argentum coin. You could call this coin an ancient forgery if you would like to, because it has just a small surface of electrum and the rest is silver. So Farnese was obviously not a serious person. While other series, for instance, the Royal Lydian series, keep to a certain a mix of metals from the beginning down to the end. The Lydian alloy of electrum consists of about 54% of gold, 44% of silver, and about 2% of copper. And after a short time of adjustments, the Lydians kept to this standard from the beginning down to the end in the time of Croesus, when Croesus switched to a bimetallic coinage of gold and silver. Another fact that I should tell you is that, well, I guess this comes later. I will come back to this problem. Yeah, here it is. Herodotus tells us that the river Pactolus, which is situated in Lydia, carries gold dust with it. In this case, Herodotus is very clear. He talks about gold and not white gold, lefkos, chrysos, nor does he talk about electrum, but electrum is actually no term of this time anyway, because it means something else. When reviewing the literature about this sentence, it occurs that what Herodotus calls gold becomes electrum, natural electrum, in the modern literature. I'm not sure whether Martin Leake or François Lenormand is the culprit. Maybe they even had it from somebody else I didn't find. However, when looking at the textbooks of the past 175 years, you will find this this notion that Herodotus tells us the river Pactolus had natural electrum dust with it. This is wrong, as was proven by the American excavators of Sardis some years ago. They made experiments, and it was found out that the river Pactolus carries gold dust with it till today, and it is nearly pure gold. It has nothing to do with natural electrum. Natural electrum occurs in nature, of course. It is an alloy with a varying mix usually with a very high gold component of about 60 to 80% of gold. However, you never can be sure that that natural electrum has a fixed mix of gold and silver. However, this was the notion, and you can find this in all the textbooks of the past 150 years, that the early electrum consists of natural electrum, and so to say that that electrum coinage, the early electrum coinage, was nothing more than a makeshift. And when the procedures to separate gold from silver was invented in the time of Croesus, Croesus was happy to start a bimetallic coinage and to get rid of all this electrum crap. This notion is, however, false. There are two procedures used by metalworkers in order to produce electrum. The first one is the so-called cupellation, in order to get rid of all the less precious metals and trace elements, and in order to get an alloy of gold and silver alone, more or less. And a second procedure called cementation is used or employed to separate the gold from the silver. This cementation is, chemically wise, a very sophisticated procedure, and it was thought for a long time that it was invented in the time of Croesus. Maybe you know this book of Ramage and another guy whose name I forgot, about the metalworkers' devices found at Sardis. But the proof that a procedure was used in the time of Croesus, it is no proof that it was used for the first time in the time of Croesus. Actually, we know from cuneiform sources that cementation was used in Mesopotamia as early as the 3rd millennium BC. And when looking at metal analysis of early electrum coins, mainly from Lydia, it strikes the eye that the alloy is quite consistent. So it can be found with all coins from this time, from the 7th century. And this would be totally impossible if the Lydians wouldn't have known how to separate gold from the silver. That is to say that all the electrum coins, from the very earliest ones down to the time of Alexander, are made of an artificially mixed alloy. So electrum was no stopgap solution for early coinage, but it was a deliberate act. I think this is one of the most important results of the past 20 years of investigation. Something that could have taught us this since about 50 years are the metal analysis employed by a German banker by the name Friedrich Bodenstedt as early as the 1970s. In his later life, he gave up his profession and went to university in order to study numismatics and archaeology. And he chose the electrum coinage of Phocaea as the topic of his PhD thesis. And because he was a wealthy man, he managed to buy many hectares and smaller denominations of electrum coins from Phocaea in very worn state, but this was not nothing that well, he didn't care about, because what he wanted to do was to cut the coins in halves in order to and have the core of the coins analyzed. And here are the results. He was able to distinguish three periods of diverging alloys in Phocaea. The very first period, well, he calls it from 600 down to 522 BC. Today we know that Phocaea started her coinage as early as, let's say, 640, 630 BC, because one coin was found in the Artemisium deposit. Anyway, this early period has an alloy of about 54% gold, very similar to the Royal Lydian coinage. In the second period, in the time around 500 BC, the gold contents dropped to 46%, and in the third period, it is even lower, below 40% of the alloy. At the same time, the copper content was enhanced. In the end, in the third period, you even have 12% of copper. But I can tell you the color of late Phocaean electrum coins is very varying. So this copper content has my guess would be not to do with the color, but mainly with the in order to harden the coin. As Phocaea had a contract with the neighboring city Mytilene on the island of Lesbos, the second and the third period are joined by Mytilene. There's a coinage contract known from a 5th century inscription that tells us some of the details of this contract. And as you can see, Mytilene has nearly the same alloy in the second and third periods of Phocaea as Phocaea had. So this precision of mixing the metals together would have been impossible, totally impossible, right from the beginning, from the 7th century onwards, if the ancient Greeks and Lydians wouldn't have known how to manage to separate gold from silver. All this is an artificial mixed alloy. As I told you earlier, there are only a few coinages which we can observe for a longer period of time. The plethora of early Electrum coinages consists of very small coin series. I guess that you know all the series I show you in this image. At the left side, the Lydium Milesian standard has a few coinages that are well known. First, the Royal Lydian series, down from circa 650 to the time of Croesus. The coinage of Miletus is vast. It was studied some years ago by a German colleague by the name Rudolf Hilbert, with a very sophisticated die study. However, if the fixed points for this coinage do not exist yet. We guess that it goes down to the time of the Ionian Revolt in the early 5th century, but the starting point is not known yet. And last, there is the coinage of Ephesus, also struck according to the Milesian standard. This consists of various groups which are clearly separated from each other. So this is actually a coinage that is struck from time to time. Only at the end, it becomes a huge coinage where the B on the obverse die is nearly how do you say that? undiscernible. It's actually like a pointillistic image. And my guess would be, but this cannot be proven yet, that this huge part of the coinage of Ephesus belongs to the Ionian Revolt, and it is actually what we could call the coinage of the Ionian Revolt. The Phocaean standard lasts much longer than the Milesian standard. The Milesian standard continues as a silver standard down to the late 5th century, but in Electrum it vanishes within the first half of the 5th century. The Phocaean standard, however, lasts down to the time of Alexander's advent in Asia Minor in 334. And the reason for this is that this is the standard used for the Black Sea trade. So you can see the series of Cyzicus in the middle column at the second place. Cyzicus, the coinage of Cyzicus was used by many players in this game in order to get grain and slaves from the Black Sea coast. And this is because the other players in this trade at the Black Sea preferred the Cyzicene coins. This is the main reason why this standard lived for such a long time. The series of Phocaea and Mytilene stopped at the same time as the series of Cyzicus, because with Alexander and his army, there was all the ways of striking coinage were changed. A fourth player within the Phocaean standard is not as long living as the other ones. Heraclea at the Pontus was founded in the middle of the 6th century and starts to coin her coinage about 530 BC. This coinage nearly vanishes after the Ionian Revolt, while Heraclea had nothing to do with the Ionian Revolt. My guess would be that at that time, the satrap at Daskyleion started to use Cyzicus as his main mint for producing coins, while Heraclea was no longer interesting for the Persians, or not that interesting, because they were now looking at the west and not at the north, as they did in the time of Darius and his expedition in the territories of the Scythians. At that time, the coinage of Heraclea was very important to the Persians. Then there's the Samian standard, which may have been confined to the island of Samos herself. We do not know yet, because all we know is that some of these series were found on the island of Samos and are very likely to have been minted by the Samian mint. The end point of all the Samian Electrum coinage is probably the year 522, when the tyrant of Samos, Polycrates, was killed by the Persians, and then the Persians took over. Last but not least, there is the Chian standard used by the mint of Lampsakos, but only in the 5th century for some time, some decades. We cannot fix this coinage to a certain date yet. In the 4th century, Lampsakos was known for a gold coinage with constantly changing obverse types. So for some reason, the Persians, and this is certainly a coinage that was produced for the Persian satrap, the Persians were no longer interested in electrum coinages of this standard. Now, when we look at this plethora of various coinages, we have to ask where to start. And the main point to start would be, of course, the Artemisium of Ephesus, because within this Artemisium, a large coin hoard was found by the British equipe of excavators in the early 20th century, exactly to be precise, in 1905. Here you have a view of the Artemision. What you can see is a column which belongs to the temple of the 4th century. As you all know, the earlier temple, which was financed by King Croesus of Lydia, was burned down by a person whose name I'm not going to tell you. And afterwards, the temple was rebuilt in the middle of the 4th century, using the plan of the archaic Artemisium, however, of course, in the modern style. Now, here's another view of this of what is left of the Artemisium. In the center of the image, where the two persons are standing, there is a quadrangle, or do you say quadrangle? Anyway, a small structure, which is called in the literature mostly the central basis. You can see it here. This is this quadrangle in green. It's also called the green schist basis because it's partly built of green schist. And the orange structures, for instance, all the columns around the temple is from the 4th century. Below, the yellow structures are the temple financed by Croesus between let's say 580 and 550 BC. And then there are some even older structures here in the center of the cella, which belong to the 7th century. The absolute chronology of this earlier structures have been have been a battlefield of opinions in the times since the 1970s. And this was actually not triggered by archaeologists, but by a numismatist, that is Martin Jessup Price of the British Museum. You might remember that in the early 1970s, a coin hoard was found in Egypt at Asyut. And Martin Price, together with Nancy Wagoner, was to publish this huge silver hoard from the 5th century. And in the course of his studies, he grasped the opinion that silver coinages had to be downdated in the 6th century, and that actually the start of silver coinage was in the time of Croesus and not earlier. And even so, many silver coinages have been downdated by Price and Wagoner at that time. And Price was, of course, well aware that this result will also affect the chronology of electrum coinages. And therefore, in a symposium at the British Museum I think in the early 1980s, he convinced the excavator, the Austrian excavator of the Artemisium, Anton Bammer, that it should be possible to redate the structures in the temple cella of the Artemisium to the early 6th century. in former years, these structures had been dated to the 7th centuries, according to what the British excavators of the Artemisium had found out. And so there was a downdating spree in the 80s and 90s. And when you open the book of Georges Le Raider, La naissance de la monnaie, you will find that even Georges Le Raider downdated the earliest Electrum coins to the early 6th century. While he was not very comfortable with that, as some of his scholars told me, he even held this result of Price and Anton Bammer. About 10 years ago, or actually it started in the late 20th century, that some younger Austrian scholars started to reinvestigate the archaeological remains found in the Artemisium, and started to suspect the results suggested by Anton Bammer. And some years ago, exactly 5 years ago, in the white gold volume, Michael Kerschner, one of the most, he is a well-known Austrian archaeologist, and according to his investigation, the structures within the temple cellar can be dated through the time between 680 and 600 BC. And the structure, which is here in the center, the so-called central basis, here you have a view of it within the Artemisium. What you can see here, the upper row of stones are limestones of a local limestone, and they can be dated to the time of Croesus. They belong to the Croesus temple, but the structures of smaller stones below that are from earlier structures, and this is the context of the Artemisium deposit that was found by the British excavators. And today we can date these structures to the time between 640 and 620 BC. That has to say that coinage started as early as that, and maybe earlier, because the Artemisium deposit contained a wide range of. Oh, I'm too far, hopefully. So here you have some components of the Artemisium deposit, not only coins but also jewelry, which was dated by the archaeologist Paul Jacobsthal in a joint article together with Stanley Robinson to the 7th century. Actually, the archaeologists always preferred a high date for this deposit, while the numismatists wanted to keep it lower for several reasons I will talk about in a few minutes. And therefore, a date between 600 and 590 BC was proposed by Stanley Robinson, and this is the date you can find in the inventory of Greek coin hoards. Today it has to be redated, as I told you, to 640 to 620 BC, and this creates a problem. When looking at the coins of the Artemisium deposit, these are not all the coins, but all I could put in one image, you will find some Lydian coins here with the Lydian lion looking right, others also with the Lydian lion but looking left, which belongs to an early group of this Lydian coinage, and with a small signature here. This is readable, and it can be read as Volvet. And this creates a problem, because in 1890, Jan Pieter Six, a Belgian numismatist, proposed that Volvet should be nothing else than the Lydian king Aliates, the father of Croesus. And as I told you, the Lydian chronology is very complex and confused, and you must not trust what Herodotus tells about the length of the reigns of the various kings. But at that time, the all scholars kept to the chronology of Herodotus, which is based, by the way, on the fall of Lydia in 546, based on the date given by Eusebius, because Herodotus doesn't tell any date. And when reckoning back, you have to believe that King Alyattes ascended to the Lydian throne not earlier than 617 or maybe 610 BC. Therefore, if the Valvate coins belong to King Alyattes, the Artemisium deposit could not have been buried before that date. And now we have a date long before that date. And now we have to ask whether Valvet is King Alyattes at all. And today we even have a Kukalim treaty found in the Artemisium, however, in a layer from the late 6th century. So this coin doesn't give us any clue for the chronology, but even so, you have a Kukas coin found in the Artemisium. In order to coming to the finish of my lecture, I would like to introduce you to the Kukalim coinage in order to solve the Valvet problem. Here, as there are only a few coins of Kukalim, a die study of this coinage is quite easy. As you can see, the triti share a single punch die with the hecti. This is this punch die that looks like the structure within the punch die looks just like a plant or something like that. And it can be found with triti and hecti as well. And what is more important, there's another punch die, this one, the second one on the hecti, that is shared by a single hecti of Valvet. This dialing is known since a long time, since the early 1960s, when Margaret Thompson published a new coin bought by the ANS that showed her that Kukalim and Valvet share a punch die. This is this die link. Can you see the link between the two coins? Well, it's not so easy at the first sight, but here you have a quadrangular structure within this punch die, and there's a second triangular structure, and so you hopefully believe me that this is one and the same punch die. The second question that Margaret Thompson was eager to answer was the sequence of the coins, whether the Kukalim hecti at the ANS or the Valvet hecti in London in the British Museum is the first. Today, the notion has prevailed that the Valvet hecti is the first, and the ANS hecti of Kukas was struck thereafter. This you can find with many publications from Lieselotte Weidauer onwards. This was published in 1975, and even in some most recent articles, you will find the notion that Valvet was the first and Kukas was the second. And that is, of course, for all those who try to link the Kukalim coinage with King Gyges, is hard to reconcile with the history as far as we know it. However, there's another coin of Kukas that was not taken into account until now. This coin was bought by Stanley Robinson in the 1970s from the market and donated to the Ashmolean Museum at Oxford. Here you can read the inscription Kukalim upwards. And here on the reverse, you see the same punch die as on the Valvet Hecti in London. However, there are still these two small dots which are undiscernible. Here is a remnant of one of them, and all the rest is worn out. That is to say, the Kukalim Hecti in Oxford was struck earlier than the Valvet Hecti in London. So it is clear Kukas comes first. Now we have to take a brief look at the two dynasties that we are told of by ancient historians. The dynasty that Herodotus tells us stories about is the Mermnad dynasty. First comes King Gyges, and then a king by the name Ardys. Sadiates and Aliates follow, and the last one is, of course, Croesus. A better source for Lydian history than Herodotus might be a Lydian by the name Xanthos. Unfortunately, there are only a few pages of his fragments in Jacobi's edition of Fragments of Ancient Historians, and so he is not very well known. However, we know a little bit more of his work from the writings of Nicolaus of Damascus from the time of Emperor Augustus. And these parts of Nicolaus are preserved just by a late antique source, by something that the Emperor Constantinos VII of Byzantium had to be put together. But it is clear it comes from Nicolaus. And when comparing what we know of Xanthos with that, what we know about Lydian history from Nicolaus, it becomes clear that Nicolaus is based on Xanthos rather than on Herodotus. And Nicolaus tells us a lot about the former dynasties of the Lydian kingdom. And so we can put we can write a stemma of the various kings. It occurs that there is an Aliates even as early as the beginning of the Heraclid dynasty, and all the other names known are from Croesus, except for Gyges and Croesus, are also attested in the earlier dynasty. And what is even more important is that Xanthos calls the son of Gyges not Ardys, as Herodotus did, but Aliates. Here you have this. He in the first place, he calls Aliates was the son of Sadiates. This, of course, is this Aliates is the father of Croesus, who was a son of a king by the name Sadiates. However, Sadiates himself, king of the Lydians, was a son of a king by the name Aliates, and this is no other than the son of Croesus. Therefore, the Valvet to be found on the Valvet Hecti in London is not Aliates, the father of Croesus, but the grand-grandfather of Croesus, actually the son of Gyges. And therefore, there is a dialink between the coinages of Kukas and Valvet. And therefore, the high date of the Artemisium deposit does no longer create any problem for the numismatists. And now I think we can start to work out a new chronology of both the Lydian kings and their coinages.